Hello and welcome to a Week 17 edition of the quote-unquote expert, quote-unquote roundtable. My name is Adam Levitan. I am the father of a very special lady, the most beautiful beast in the world, Jerry, and it is a sad day. This is the last show, the last quote-unquote expert, quote-unquote roundtable of the season that we will do. JM is crying tears of hemp. He will now spend his Friday nights freeing Tibet instead of doing this show. JM, he's in Oklahoma where
it was better. All of this was better the first time. All of it.
The people listening on the podcast don't know that we had audio difficulties. So he has internet. He's in Oklahoma. JM, what's going on?
The original joke was saving Tibet, which something about those words is just funnier. Yeah. We got a really good laugh out of it. So I'll say it again. I said it the first time. It's always fun doing this show. I've been watching this show since it was Adam and Pete and Al back before I even wrote for RotoGrinders. So it's an honor to work with Adam. I always think of Adam like a big brother, so it's cool to be able to do the show together every Friday night. Definitely one of my highlights. So till next year, we'll close out on a high note this time around.
Yeah, and I'll say this, like you can tell, I listen to some shows sometimes, you can tell when people don't like put in the work and they're just out there just kind of talking. JM is like you can tell when he's playing guys that are 0.8% like you can tell that he's doing his own work and is so on top of every player. So I also really like doing the show. Glad we do it. It is a highlight for me as well. And it's also like the last show that I do. So it's like the last, I actually don't even do that many shows anymore. I only do like 2 or 3, but this is the last one. So it always sticks in my mind when I'm making lineups, and maybe that's why it hasn't been that great of a year, but we're gonna change all that in week 17.
It's because you haven't been playing Duke Johnson. That's the problem.
How many weeks out of 17 have you played Duke Johnson?
I think I've on my main team probably 6.
Oh, that's it? I would have guessed higher.
Yeah, maybe 7. I don't know, but more than anyone else, I'd say.
Oh, way more, yeah.
I'd say I probably had 4 weekends that were winning weekends specifically because he got me close to 20 points at under 5K, and about 2 weekends that were specifically losing weekends because of Duke. I'll take that. I'll take those percentages.
No, for sure. Okay, this slate, we have a lot to get to because it's so information heavy. We do have most of the information. Like, there's not a lot still out there. I'm pretty confident that I know exactly how it's going to go in terms of playing time and guys resting for most teams, but it is a 16-game slate, so people will be overwhelmed. I think that if you're following it closely, you shouldn't feel overwhelmed because your player pool should be naturally narrowed by what these teams are doing with their players. So I am certainly expanding what I would normally play a little bit bigger this week because A, it's the last slate of the calendar year, tax purposes obviously, and B, because I think I have a bigger edge just not being overwhelmed on this slate. JM, how do you feel?
Yeah, I agree. I think that week 17 is a good week for going tournament heavy, cutting out cash games a little bit is how I like to approach it, just because I do think that we have a bigger edge. I think that people tend to swing too far toward crazy plays. We have guys starting like Michael Clark and Geronimo Allison, and I think you got to pay attention to what types of tournaments you're playing and where you're playing certain players. I mean, we also have guys starting like Jamal Williams and Julio Jones. And I think that sometimes these guys can draw lower ownership than they should on these weeks because people get a little bit too crazy playing guys that they wouldn't normally play. I mean, you wouldn't be playing Alex Smith against the Denver defense, but we'll see some Patrick Mahomes ownership against the Denver defense. We can get into guys like that. But yeah, I mean, I think that like any week, I said this in the NFL Edge this week, like any week, you're trying to play who you feel are the best plays. And, that's the same week in, week out. And I think that the best plays are not necessarily some of these crappy guys that people might look toward. So it's always an interesting week to dig in. I think if you're actually watching the show in week 17, you're putting that level of work, then you probably have an edge on the field. It's a good week to take in some money.
Be careful what you say about Patrick Mahomes. Do not refer to Patrick Mahomes as a scrub. Let's start there at the quarterback position and at the bottom tier. I think there's a few options below 6K that caught my eye. I think Jacoby Brissett is in play against this atrocious Texans pass defense, which has allowed the most big plays, the most 40-plus yard passing plays in the entire league. We also have Tyrod Taylor, who I know we've talked plenty in here about his low volume, but in a must-win spot against the Miami team that I think will be in full evaluation mode. I think Tyrod is least interesting. And then Mahomes, I probably don't think is as bad of a play as you do, just from a raw talent perspective and from a fantasy perspective. I think he provides a better ceiling than Alex Smith would on a normal week, and he's 4,700. Of course, going to Denver, I would almost never play a quarterback. So let's start there at below 6K. What do you think about those three guys and anybody else below 6K?
Yeah, I think Mahomes, what I said about Mahomes was if he's under 1% owned in large field tourneys, I think it's a great play. If a guy at Denver, a rookie quarterback, and I know his talent is through the roof, but talking about a rookie quarterback at Denver without weapons in his first career game, that's not a guy I want to roster. It's a roster spot's too valuable to me in cash games and small field tournaments. And I think that obviously saying in cash games sounds absurd, but I think that when we get certain guys start getting hyped up, people start thinking about them in those contexts. And I think that Mahomes has huge upside, but you got to still give him like a 5, 6, 7 point floor. You're talking about a guy playing his first career game. Tyreek Hill is out. Kareem Hunt will probably be out. Travis Kelce will probably be out if these guys play. They won't play many snaps. So it's just a really tough spot for a guy to come in his first game. I can get more on board with Brissett and Tyrod. There are a couple of guys just barely above 6. There's a lot of value this week. And a couple of guys just barely above 6K that I like more. But, Brissett has 12 touchdown passes on the year. I know that he played well against the Texans last time. My concern with Brissett, all right, T.Y. Hilton has 103 targets. Jack Doyle has 103 targets. Like, this guy is not throwing people open. He's not throwing into tight windows. So he's going to need players to be open to have some upside. Obviously, with T.Y. Hilton, what he did last time in this matchup, last time was on the road. There is upside here, but I don't think it's a lock like probably a lot of people do. I think that we'll see over 20% ownership on Brissett, and I'd be fine fading that just because I think there's more upside with a higher floor in other spots. I do think that he's a good play. Same thing with Tyrod. I don't think they're the best plays for point per dollar.
Yeah, I actually don't think Brissett's ownership will get that high because we don't have so many high-priced players available on this slate. No Antonio Brown, no Le'Veon Bell, no DeAndre Hopkins, no Kareem Hunt. Like, there's not a lot of high-priced guys that people want to play, I would think, outside of, Julio, Gronk, and guys like that. So I don't think people are going to necessarily feel a need to go cheap at quarterback. I do not think Brissett's ownership will get over 10 or 12%. I think in this specific matchup, he's had some really tough matchups lately. I think I always look for guys who have played really tough schedules and then all of a sudden get a really good matchup like Brissett has here. So I do like him. I think Tyrod will step up and play pretty well here too. If we go up into the 6K range, we have Kirk Cousins against this dumpster fire of a Giants team. Obviously, Landon Collins is hurt. Eli Apple, which I don't know if it matters or not, he's suspended. Janoris Jenkins has been gone. Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie has been playing so bad that he's been benched or at least lost snaps. Like, you couldn't find a much better spot for a Redskins team, which is still trying. And Kirk Cousins needs positive games for his contract situation, even though he's already hashtag how rich. I think him and Stafford are both really interesting. I would prefer Stafford if I knew that the Lions were completely all out to win this game, and I think that they are. I'm pretty sure that they are, but they were just eliminated from the playoffs this past week. So I assume you like Stafford. I assume you like Cousins, or maybe not, but either way, are you concerned at all about how straight the Lions will play this game?
I'm not. I think if we made a list of the 5 player friendliest coaches in the NFL, Jim Caldwell would be on that list. I mean, and honestly, Caldwell, man, like, he's not a great in-game adjuster. He's not the best Sunday coach, but he's a very good throughout the week coach. I mean, he really genuinely is. And he's a guy that players just love playing for. I think after they laid that egg last week, and we're getting a little narrative-y here, but they're eliminated from the playoffs. They kind of laid down last week in a must-win game. And I think that you'll see max effort here in a tremendous spot. What are we laughing about over here? You get this smirky smile, like.
Well, I was just thinking about how good my Tibet joke was, and I was kind of going over it in my head. You know what I mean?
It's all about wording. Hey, in comedy, man, it's all about you got to use the right words, and you had it nailed the first time. We won't be doing the show anymore. JM will be saving Tibet on Friday nights. It was pretty good. And it just kind of like take 2, you kind of went through the motions. You were like the week 16 Detroit Lions. So Yeah, I think that we see max effort here. I think that this team is playing for Caldwell, whose job is on the line. I mean, perpetually on the line. And then Kirk Cousins. Yeah, Kirk Cousins, top 8 in passer rating, top 8 in passing touchdowns, top 8 in yards. Like, he's had a great season considering Pierre Garçon's gone, Deshaun Jackson's gone. Terrell Pryor was a complete dud. Chris Thompson's gone, like, been hurt the last several weeks. Man, Cousins has played really well given what he's had to work with. I believe it's 22 touchdowns and 10 picks, something like that. Giants have given up the most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. So these two are my 2 favorites as far as just, I mean, honestly, like you said, there's a lot of value, not a lot of guys to pay up for. So we can get up to Russ, we can get up to Cam pretty easily as well. But I really like these 2 quite a bit. I don't think I'll go down to Brissett and Tyrod. And honestly, I won't at all be surprised if they have a good game. Just they're not good quarterbacks. And I'll take the good quarterback in a good matchup for just a little bit more. They could all score the same, and it wouldn't surprise me. But I think if we played this slate out 1,000 times, we get a better score from Cousins and Stafford more often. So that's kind of where I'm focused on this slate.
Let's keep going up to in the 6K range. You mentioned Cam and Russ. I noticed that you left out Phillip Rivers and Tom Brady. Both need the game for playoff positioning. We've seen Tom Brady really struggle lately in terms of fantasy production. Gets a really good matchup here against his Jets team, which has been so bad. In the secondary, I think that Tom Brady might end up being the most owned quarterback on this slate, actually, just because people want to play Patriots because they know the playoff positioning. It seems to me you might think Tom Brady and Rivers would be interesting fades despite their situations.
Yeah, I mean, I like them both. Oakland has really tightened up against wide receivers since Ken Norton got fired. I think it's like bottom 7 in receptions allowed to wide receivers on the year. Sean Smith is actually playing pretty well. TJ Carey is healthy again, playing well. So I like Rivers. I think he's a top 8 quarterback this week, but he's not a guy I'm locking onto. My concern with Tommy is the Achilles injury. I think it's actually affecting him, and not a lot's been talked about it because we're seeing, we've seen it for decades with Bill Belichick just listing guys on the injury report constantly with minor injuries. But Patriots aren't a team that just constantly holds players out of practice. That is not their MO. Brady's missed a lot of practice time. It was since he popped up with this Achilles injury that he went on this run of 1 interception per game. They have had a lot of run favorable matchups lately, so that factors in too to why he has not performed as well. And this matchup slants a little bit more toward the pass. So I like Brady this week. I do like Stafford and Cousins a little bit more for a little bit less in price. So I have no qualms with Brady, but just personally, I'm a little concerned about the Achilles injury. I think that it has been an issue more than maybe the Patriots are letting on.
Yeah, and I would also say that it's kind of Brady's cold streak, if you want to call it that, has coincided with Chris Hogan being out. I mean, when you have Philip Dorsett out there, it's just like a nothing, and Brandon Cooks is kind of turned into a one-dimensional option for them. It's like, well, they don't have that great options. James White isn't out there, Rex Burkhead's so good in the pass game. He's not out there. So certainly some dings on Brady. I do think that just from a matchup perspective, this is a chance for a big game for Tom Brady. Also in that range is Russ Wilson, who, I thought last week was like the perfect spot for Russ. I had 2 teams in the main event on DraftKings, used Russ on both of them. God, it looks like I just thought that Seattle was going to play really well, which they ended up playing really well, but they just didn't score enough. Didn't move the ball offensively. We know on this show, if you watch regularly, that Darrell Bevel is the arch enemy. So in a home game against Arizona that Seattle needs, can we go back to Russ for a 3rd straight week when he's disappointed in the last 2?
I mean, they needed last week's game too, right? Like, is Darrell Bevel the worst offensive coordinator in football? It's just absolutely pathetic. The amount that they've rushed for under 1,000 yards. If you take away Russell Wilson's rushing yards, they are the worst run offense in the NFL, and he's just set on running the ball. It's like he has PTSD from that Super Bowl where they tried to pass, and it's like it's absurd, man. I like Russ a lot. I don't think I could go there in cash games. Again, I'm going lighter in cash games this week to take advantage of tournaments. But same thing here. I mean, I had 3 teams in the main event last week. All 3 had Russ on them. It was a great pivot off of Cam. Cam had a disappointing game early, and then I thought we were looking pretty with Russ, but Yeah, I mean, I like Russ. The concerns are obviously the coaching and the fact that they never let him throw more than 30 times. He did have a 45 attempt game in Week 16 last year against Arizona, but obviously Arizona scored 34 points. That's what it takes. It takes a team putting up points for Darrell Bevell to realize that he needs to let Russ take over the game. So I don't think he's a lock. I think he's a good play. The matchup is perfectly fine for Russ. Matchup, as we saw against the Jags, is not really the issue. Do you have any thoughts on Cam Newton? I know he's been kind of up and down against this Atlanta team, but 14 carries a game. They're kind of letting him take over here down the stretch.
Yeah, and I like the Panthers in this spot. I mean, I've been trying to be low on the Falcons all year from a lot of perspectives, and I think that Cam will come in here and play well. I think the Panthers are very motivated. They can finish anywhere from the NFC second seed all the way down to the fifth seed. So, yeah, I mean, anytime your quarterback has the running ability of Cam and you can project him for anywhere from 8 to 14 carries, like he's going to have a really high floor and a really high ceiling. I think the matchup sets up really well for two of his best weapons, Christian McCaffrey and Greg Olsen. So I think that's another kind of feather in the cap for Cam. So, yeah, I like him too. There's certainly a lot of quarterbacks to like. I always kind of prefer Russ because it's just like he was the entire offense. So if you think that Seattle is going to score 28 points, like Russ is going to have a good game. You could see other things happening with the Panthers, such as Jonathan Stewart scoring and rushing touchdowns, such as defensive touchdowns, such as Christian McCaffrey rushing for a touchdown, etc. So, yeah, I would prefer Russ, but I like Cam too. Any other quarterbacks that we did not talk about?
No, I mean, I think that the big thing here is just don't get too crazy at the quarterback position. Take the floor where you can get it. There's plenty of ceiling to go at the floor. I mean, I'm comfortable throwing Tyrod and Brissett in that floor and ceiling bucket. I know a lot of people are drawn toward those guys this week, but they're really good quarterbacks and good matchups, and that's kind of where I'm looking this week is good quarterbacks and good matchups.
At the running back position, before we go down to the bottom, I want to start with what I expect to be the uber chalk. In the Patriots backfield, they have 5 running backs on the active roster. They have none on the practice squad. 3 of their running backs on that active roster are hurt. We have Mike Gillislee out. We have Rex Burkhead out. We have James White questionable. And then they have Brandon Bolden, the strict special teamer. Once again, it leaves Dion Lewis in a complete 3-down plus goal line role. We saw what he can do with that last week. DraftKings has been very aggressive to move salaries this season. They did not do it on Dion Lewis, left him down at 6,800. I think we'll see him in the 30 to 40% range in a lot of spots on DK. Is that good chalk or bad chalk on Dion Lewis?
So you think Lewis is going to be higher owned than Derrick Henry?
Yes.
Wow. I would prefer Kenyon Drake over Dion Lewis in that same price range. And I don't think that's that crazy. The Patriots are a matchup-specific offense. James White appears to be on track to play, which leaves Dion Lewis in this, kind of 2-down role. The Patriots love James White on 3rd down. He's a great pass blocker, a great route runner. I hadn't given much thought to Dion Lewis as like a staple piece this week. I think he's a fine play. It kind of comes down to James White. Like if James White plays, then yeah, we have this 30 touch thing going on again. If James White is out there, we're looking at Dion Lewis in a typical 20 to 22, 23 carry range, which is fine. But that's not like, Damian Williams isn't playing. Kenyon Drake has the best running back matchup in the NFL. Kenyon Drake is as talented as Dion Lewis. If he's not, it's close. I would take Kenyon Drake over Dion Lewis in that price range this week.
So I actually played Kenyon Drake last week somewhat begrudgingly. We talked about on here how going to Arrowhead is so tough, and maybe I shouldn't have pulled the trigger there. I like Kenyon Drake a lot. My concern this week is that the Dolphins are just like, we're going to be in evaluation mode. They already said that they might give David Fales some snaps in this game. I think the All-Stars are going to play. I think they're going to play to win the game. I think Drake's going to be out there a ton. It just concerns me that with Buffalo so motivated and like Jay Cutler, total DGAF mode in week 17, like I don't know. I don't know what kind of performance they put in. I don't know if David Fales gets out there, et cetera. Does that concern you at all?
Yeah, that's a good point. And to be completely honest, I haven't looked at the high end of the price range that much at running back because there's so much phenomenal value this week. I mean, so many guys, including a lot of guys who are going to go low owned that are 20 touch players that I don't see the need on my own rosters to pay up. If I'm paying up, it'll probably be for just an ultra talent like Alvin Kamara, just somebody who can break the slate wide open. I was 100% on Dion Lewis last week, so it's not like I dislike the play. He was the very first. As soon as James White was announced as out, he was the first person locked onto my roster. So I'm not down on Dion Lewis as a player. Obviously, I'm a lifelong Patriots fan. I'm not down on the Patriots offense. I just if I'm going up there, I don't see as clear of a path to 30 plus points for Dion Lewis this week as I see for Kenyon Drake or for Alvin Kamara, LaShawn McCoy, some of these guys who could just get fed monster workloads and really take over a game. So, but again, take that with a grain of salt because I'm looking cheap primarily and really have not spent a ton of time looking at these high price guys. I think we can get 20 plus points cheap rather than searching for 20 plus on the high end.
Yeah, and we'll see on James White. I mean, he was limited all last week and ended up not playing, limited all week this week and listed questionable. So we will see on James White. Let's go down to the bottom here of the running back range. We have Malcolm Brown. I think people are going to play. Obviously, Todd Gurley is going to be out. Malcolm Brown is so tough for me to say how many carries he's going to get. I do think that Lance Dunbar and Justin Davis are going to mix in. San Francisco has played lights out run defense since like week 11. Reuben Foster, the star run stopping middle linebacker for the 49ers, is going to play. I certainly have concerns about Malcolm Brown. I think in that same range, you have Wayne Gallman in that same range for a little bit more. You can play Carlos Hyde and Jamal Williams and these guys. Is there anybody else below 5K that you like at running back, and what do you think about Malcolm Brown and Wayne Gallman?
Yeah, you touched on the guys that I like down there. I'm not particularly interested in Malcolm Brown just because it's a really tough matchup. Like you said, I laid out in the NFL Edge what the 49ers have done the last 4 weeks against some really good run teams. Leonard Fournette, I think it was 78 yards. The Titans running backs under 80 yards. It's been week in and week out that this run defense has held teams way below expectations. On the other side, you have Wayne Gallman against a Washington team that's just bad against the run. Gave up 7 receptions to C.J. Anderson last week. And this isn't fluky, Gallman's recent workload. It's since Ben McAdoo got fired. Gallman has averaged 6.3 catches per game. A player doesn't just trip into 6.3 catches per game. This is designed. This is, a guy who played 72% of the snaps last week. So I think there's a lot to like with Gallman at 4,200. There's a lot to like with Jamal Williams. I think he's just right above that 5K mark. But and then Carlos Hyde, Carlos Hyde, this team has been getting Matt Breida more involved. He's actually probably a better player, better fit for their offense. But I do think that we'll still see 16 to 18 carries for Carlos Hyde. I would be fine missing out on Hyde probably before a couple of these other guys just because there are more paths to him having a bad game. But and then we got, I've heard so much talk about Derrick Henry, and I'm like, I would love for somebody to tell me why Derrick Henry is 3 times as good of a play as Jamal Williams, or 10 times as good of a play as Wayne Gallman. I mean, look, Derrick Henry's a great player. It's a good running offense. It's a good matchup. But, dude, Jamal Williams, look what he was doing. He was 7K just a couple weeks ago based off of his production. No Aaron Jones. We're going to see 20 carries, 4 or 5 catches in a phenomenal matchup. So do you have any takes on kind of these? And then Alex Collins, too, is right in there. 105 yards shy of 1,000. Obviously, the Ravens need the win. That's their first priority. But I think their second priority will be getting him to 1,000 yards. Do you have any takes on all these cheaper guys?
Yeah, I'm also not too interested in Malcolm Brown. I am warming to Wayne Gallman. I think a big reason he played so many snaps last week is because they were getting absolutely trucked. But there's no reason to think they won't get absolutely trucked again. They're still using Paul Perkins. They're still using Orleans Darkwa. I think that's why you see the ownership percentage on Gallman going to be way lower. People are like, it's tough for me. I think Darkwa's going to play, blah, blah, blah. Agree with you that Gallman does have a very high catch projection. If we can get clarity in this and maybe we can, that Gallman's going to start and be featured in this Week 17 game. That would certainly intrigue me. But yeah, I think that's interesting. I would rather get up to the Jamal Williams, Derrick Henry, Dion Lewis range. And let me talk about Derrick Henry for a second. I actually wrote him up as a fade in, I don't know if I'm going to fade him in cash, but I think Derrick Henry will end up being a really good fade. In tournaments, Derrick Henry has played like 617 snaps in his NFL career and only caught 23 passes. David Fluellen is going to be active and might be the third down back. They also called up Khalif Muhammad from the practice squad. I think Derrick Henry is going to play a ton, but he could play well and not pay it off. Like he could go, 19-90-0 with one catch, and you're in big trouble. And we've talked about that so many times on here on DK, how important it is to have pass catchers. So Jamal Williams to me is an awesome play. No Devontae Adams, no Jordy Nelson. You would think that this would be a complete Jamal Williams show. 17 carries, 4.4 catches per game when Aaron Jones has been out or extremely limited. So I think both those plays are really awesome in that range. I'm
really glad to hear you say that about Henry because, I don't read a lot of other people's stuff throughout the week, but I've just seen a lot of hype on Henry, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm missing. Again, good player, but like you said, he's not really involved in the pass game. 10 catches this year in 15 games, and just we have some guys here who catch a ton of passes and are in just as good of matchups. So I'm glad we're on the same page there.
If Joe Mixon ends up ruled out, do you have any interest in Gio Bernard? Going to Baltimore is so brutal, but we've seen Gio Bernard get literally 30 touches in games when Joe Mixon is out.
Yeah, I would definitely have interest. It was like middle of the season, this run defense really tightened up quite a bit. They've been a matchup to avoid for several weeks now. I would prefer Alex Collins on the other side of that game. But like you said, the touches are just out of control. And obviously he's a pass catching back. So he's involved in the pass game, and then it just kind of trickles down from there. So I have no qualms with Gio. He wouldn't be the first place I would be looking. I would prefer Alex Collins, who's averaging 4.7 yards a carry, the same as Derrick Henry, in a great matchup in against a team without Vontaze Burfict. We've talked before in the show about what a difference maker he is on the defense. That was really the biggest difference between their ugly blowout losses in weeks 14 and 15, and then their blowout or their great win in week 16 against a team that was trying to get to the playoffs. I would prefer Alex Collins, but I'd be fine with Gio in there.
I think Christian McCaffrey is set up so well. Atlanta gave up the most running back receptions last season. They are allowing the most running back receptions this season. I don't think Cam trusts Devin Funchess as a load-bearing number one wideout. So I think this sets up from a schematic perspective and from like a talent perspective really well for Christian McCaffrey and somewhat Greg Olsen, who we'll get to in a minute. But Christian McCaffrey, obviously, we're not going to get the 25 touches or whatever, but at 6,700, we're almost guaranteed 5 or 6 catches in this matchup with upside for a lot more. I think Christian McCaffrey as a tournament play is really interesting. And then as you go up, you get Mark Ingram, you get Alvin Kamara, you get LaShawn McCoy, who I think will probably go under owned because so many people are going to be playing the cheap running backs. So from McCaffrey and up, does anybody jump out at you besides, you obviously mentioned Kenyon Drake already?
Yeah, I guess I'm the wrong person to ask about. I don't want to jinx Christian McCaffrey. I think last week was the first time I played him on my main team all season, and he had his worst game of the year. So I'm a little scarred by that. Absolutely. He's going to be involved. Like you said, everything you said about the matchup is right on point. No reason to dislike him this week if you've been on that train all year. I think that's the way to look at it. If you've been playing McCaffrey this year, this is, a good spot once again. There's no reason not to play him. If you've been off McCaffrey, I don't think that it necessarily spikes his workload any more than any other matchup. This team is giving him kind of those 6, 7, 8 targets regardless. So if you've been fading McCaffrey, I don't think you'll regret it, but I think that he'll put up his general score this week. LaShawn McCoy, Kamara. Kamara has gotten more work the last couple weeks, which I think is interesting, and his snaps really haven't risen that much. I believe he's played 69 snaps the last 2 weeks. Ingram has played 71. So that's still split down the middle. The upside is the same on each guy. I think that are we comfortable saying Kamara's floor is higher just because, Ingram can catch passes, but it's not guaranteed. So I think you're looking at same ceiling on both guys, a higher floor on Kamara. And then LaShawn McCoy, he's had 21 or more touches in every Bills win. He's had under 20 touches in 5 of their 7 losses. And it's a thing of just they abandon the run too quickly when they get behind, and they ride the run when they're ahead. So I think that we'll see. This is a game that the Bills should win. The only concern is it's tough to go down and play in the humidity and the heat when you're a cold weather team at this time of year. That hurt the Patriots a few weeks ago down in Miami. So that's the only real concern, but I like McCoy quite a bit, and I agree. I think he'll be overlooked, which gives him a great path to really winning somebody a tournament this week.
Anybody else? I assume we're not interested in like the Charkandrick Wests of the world and like the Stephen Ridleys of the world and stuff like that.
I'm not, just because I think that there's much better value. I do think that if you want to go to my Browns running backs, I expect the Browns to have a good shot at a win this week. The only time they actually had a lead in the game, Isaiah Crowell had 19 carries. This is a top 5 run offense, DVOA, yards per carry. This is a really good run offense. Isaiah Crowell is a good player. Duke Johnson, obviously, one of the top point per touch players in the NFL. I think that this sets up well as a Crowell week. I don't think I would go there in smaller field tourneys or single entry tourneys, but something where you got to beat, tens of thousands of entries. I could see going to Crowell in a good matchup on a team that's going to be starting Landry Jones and Stephen Ridley and a bunch of scrubs out there that Crowell could get his carries.
All right. At the wide receiver position, I want to start with the 2 guys I expect to easily be the most owned. That is Julio Jones and T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton, obviously 5,900 in this amazing matchup against Houston. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's talking about what he did to Houston last time. And Julio Jones, with all this like high-priced guys dropping out, high-priced guys unmotivated, we have Julio Jones extremely motivated in a dream matchup against the Panthers team that we are, been playing wide receivers against for like 2 months and just crushing with it. Like they stop everything except for perimeter wide receivers. So Julio and T.Y. Hilton, I expect to be 2 of the highest owned players on the slate. How do you feel about that?
What ownership would Julio have to get to before you'd consider fading him in tourneys?
I think anytime a wide receiver gets above 30, there's a reason to fade.
Yeah. This is where we miss Hefe. We need that strategy element, because you and I are like, dude, this guy's
bros. Yeah, you know what? Forget the game theory, bros, man. I'm sick of that.
Yeah, we're like, this guy's the best play, right? Like, play him. Julio is the best play. I don't think it's that close. When you look at what Oakland's done to wide receivers, Sean Smith, who matches up pretty well with Keenan Allen, will shadow him when he's on the outside, which is only about 50% of the snaps. But Oakland did a really good job against Keenan Allen last time. Michael Thomas has his hamstring issue. So we get up into this price range, man. It's Julio. And sure, he's disappointed all year for expectations, but this guy is still top 10 in most major wide receiver categories. The floor is pretty high. So I think if he disappoints, he's still getting you around 14, 15 points. And obviously he could put up, 45, 50. He's the only wide receiver on this slate that can crack 35 points, reasonably. So I'm totally fine going with Julio chalk. I think that the value I'll be taking at running back will be off the board enough that I'm really not that concerned about the fact that Julio is going to be that high on. So, if we want to play a game theory bro role, we can say, fade him for X reason. But Julio is the best play on the slate for sure.
And your take on T.Y. Hilton, who I think will also be in like the 25+% own range.
Yeah, T.Y. Hilton, I'm fine with it. I have a question though. Marvin Jones or T.Y. Hilton, who's a better play?
Yeah, I mean, if we assume that the Lions are all out, Marvin Jones is an awesome play for sure as well. I think there's less competition for targets on the Colts, and we'll certainly get into Kenny Golladay and Golden Tate as well. But yeah, I think that from a game theory bro perspective, you're going to get way less ownership on Marvin.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're genuinely like equitable plays to one another. On paper, if you said same ownership on the two, I don't know that I would automatically pick T.Y. Hilton. And that's just because I don't think Brissett's a very good quarterback. And I know that the Texans are bad and they have improved quarterback play week to week to week. Anybody who plays them plays above expectations. But look, Brissett, he's just not – did he even throw a touchdown pass with the Patriots last year in that Josh McDaniels offense with those weapons? I think it was 2 full games and 0 touchdown passes. Took a 16-0 shutout against the Bills. Sure, that was his rookie year, but this guy has 12 touchdown passes all season. He started all year. He's had T.Y. Hilton all year. And I think that the key here is to remember, like, Brissett is not throwing to guys who are covered, and T.Y. Hilton should be open. So there's every reason to expect a good game, but I just think that it is a lower floor than people will want to admit. People don't think like this. And so, look, if Hilton goes out and puts up 30 points and Brissett puts up 29 points, come at me on Twitter, whatever. Tell me how wrong I was. I'm not saying these guys can't put up a good game. I'm just saying the floor is lower than people want to admit on these, Brissett's not that good of a quarterback. He's not an NFL starting quarterback. He is a good backup quarterback. So I'm leaning Marvin Jones over T.Y. Hilton. I like Hilton. He's definitely one of my top 5 or 6 favorite receivers on the week, but he's not like a lock for me this week. I don't know. You have any thoughts on that? You think I'm way off on that?
No. Even in the game where T.Y. Hilton went off against the Texans, he only caught 5 balls. It's not like he's the kind of guy who is going to get a lot of targets and a lot of he's seen like less than 10 targets a bunch this year. I just think that the matchups lately have been so tough, and when T.Y. Hilton, like, the conditions are right, we often can predict his boom weeks, at home on the fast track against the Texans defense that gives up the most pass plays of 40-plus yards in the entire league. Like, if he was going to have a boom week, if you can really project boom weeks, and I think that hopefully we can, this would be one. But I totally get that T.Y. Hilton as chalk is somewhat scary. Was somewhat scary when he was 4,900 that week too.
Yeah.
But he absolutely went ham, and that was glorious.
Yeah, I like him more than A.J. Green. I like him more than Brandon Cooks. Jarvis Landry's a tough one. I like him more than – you got all these guys in this price range who are sitting. I like him more than Jamison Crowder, Des Bryant. So I like Hilton plenty, but I think I have Marvin Jones a little bit above him, just because if you look through the game logs of what Marvin Jones has done to the Packers, how much they have used him against the Packers the last couple of years – how much the Lions throw the ball. We talked about this last week. They're one of the pass-heaviest teams in football. I just think that there's plenty to like with Marvin Jones.
Let's stay with the Lions here, because I am perhaps irrationally excited about this spot for Kenny Golladay. Was dominant in college, was dominant at the Combine, was dominant throughout offseason program, was dominant in the preseason. Hasn't materialized for him at the regular season level to a huge degree yet, but with TJ Jones landing on IR prior to last week, Kenny Golladay ended up playing 95% of the snaps. Now he gets this matchup, which you've been talking about, against the Packers, which is awesome at home, like week 17, meaningless game. This is like the dream spot for the hashtag team preseason guys like Kenny Golladay. Tell me I'm crazy that Kenny Golladay for 3,300 with a target projection somewhere in the 6, 7, 8 range isn't a really strong play.
So I was in Arkansas earlier today. You ever been, Adam?
I have. I had a friend who he did a big job with like Walmart. He was down in Bentonville for like
That's
2 years.
where I was.
Yeah, and I went down and I visited him. Yeah.
So I was in Bentonville, Arkansas, and they haven't heard of the internet there. So it's a struggle. And as soon as I crossed the border into Oklahoma, I was able to pull up internet. And I was like, man, I wonder what Adam's written this week. And I saw your write-ups on Golladay, and I hadn't really thought too much about it. I think it's really sharp. I think we're getting into guesswork here, which is to a level that's probably unnecessary. But I think that the time to do it is when you can get these 30-point games. There's no – like, people do this thing where we get into guesswork to try to get this cheap guy who can get you 15 points but might get you 2. I don't think it'll surprise us if Golladay gets you 5 points, but this guy could legitimately get you 30. I think that there's a certain play that one or the other of us mentions, and whoever doesn't mention it, we immediately shut it down. It's like just when we don't even think about a guy like C.J. Anderson last week. And you've had several times this year where you have gotten off a play because you said it and I was just like, no. And I've had a couple of those. And that's kind of my reaction to Galladay is your reaction to CJ Anderson last week, where it's just like, no, why would you do that? But it honestly, like when you dig into the numbers, it makes a lot of sense. I can't see him being a staple. Like, all right, if you were putting a team in the 1,500 tourney this week, would you roll Galladay, or is that more like Wildcat and below, or is that like $88 and below, or what type of play is that for you?
It would depend on like how strongly I feel about the rest of my roster and where I want to spend. Like if I thought it was important to get LaShawn McCoy and Kenyon Drake or something like that, then I might have to play Galladay. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I like it. Like I've been looking at guys like there's not a lot of cheap wide receivers I like this week. So I've been looking at guys like, and we have value at running back, but you still can't just throw in all the top receivers. So I've been looking at guys like Keelan Cole at 5,700 with who's a good play, you know, but with a target projection of 8 to 10. And I think that you could genuinely say Galladay for 6 to 8. Like you said, kind of preseason mode, evaluation mode. I think it makes a lot of sense. I like that play a lot.
Let's stay below 5K for a second here. I think people are going to gravitate towards Josh Doxson and Devontae Parker a little bit as well. We already talked about the spot for Kirk Cousins. Josh Doxson has had an unreal difficult stretch here, has faced some of the best cornerbacks in the league, and I'm not exaggerating, over the last 7 weeks. I still think Josh Doxson is perhaps a little bit raw, but man, I mean, you get this spot against the Giants secondary now, and Josh Doxson is playing literally 100% of the snaps, and we know he has this sick talent that he showed while he was at TCU. 4,400 for Josh Doxson. Does that intrigue you?
Yeah, Doxson was one of the first guys who caught my eye. I was a little bummed to see him getting, kind of ownership traction. I think he's a good play. I think anytime we get into these, like you said, he is a pretty raw player. He's missed a lot of time. He broke his forearm that last game at TCU, and that set him behind. And then the Achilles issues, and he's been on and off the field this year. So I think we're, assessing him basically like a rookie is the best way to look at him. So I think anytime you get into these guys as chalk, a 4,400 raw guy as chalk in week 17, that's a little dangerous, but just purely on paper, I think that Doxson is a great play under 5K, probably the best play under 5K, unless you want to put Galladay above him as an on paper play. I'm a little more iffy on Devontae Parker. I've been on him back-to-back weeks, kind of talked him up back-to-back weeks. I think that people were taking his drop in targets severely out of context. I do think that the targets will be there. I don't love the matchup against a Buffalo team that's pretty good on the perimeter and that needs to win this game. So Parker is and it was last week, Jeremy Grant got 6 targets on only, I think it was 11 snaps. Week 17 is a sort of spot where you could see a guy like that. Maybe they put him out there 30, 40 snaps to see what he can do. So I would be less likely to go to Parker, but I like the Doxson call a lot. I'm kind of still toying with this Will Fuller thing too, with DeAndre Hopkins out. Do you have any thoughts? I mean, my initial reaction is, look, it's TJ Yates, but God, the matchup is phenomenal.
Right.
You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Will Fuller does not profile as like a guy we're just going to set up and throw a bunch of slants to and a bunch of comebacks to. That's just like not the way that he's going to succeed. I think he played off DeAndre Hopkins so well. So from a fit perspective, but from like if you're just doing projections, like it's almost impossible not for Will Fuller not to come up with a really good projection because like the targets have to go somewhere. You know what I mean? And like the matchup is so good. So Will Fuller is going to project well. It's just like tough for me to pull the trigger. The only other guy in the sub 5K range that I think is interesting is Kelvin Benjamin. I know he's playing through a torn meniscus, but I thought he's looked reasonably good. And if you think Tyrod's going to play well, Kelvin will be his red zone target. I think that's at least interesting on maybe more touchdown heavy sites than DK. I also think people are going to play Randall Cobb, who has shown just like no chemistry with Brett Hundley whatsoever, but Jordy and Devonta Adams are both out. I assume you're out on Randall Cobb, though.
Yeah, I would be actually likelier to take a shot on Geronimo Allison or Michael Clark just because who's going to play these guys. And we don't know a lot about Michael Clark, but we know that Geronimo Allison has upside when the targets are there. I don't expect anybody to do well. Devonta Adams is, as we saw today, the Packers are valuing him as one of the 5 best receivers in the league. I don't think he's there yet, but he's a talented receiver, and he's the only guy who's been able to do well with Brett Hundley under center. So I don't think I'll actually go there, but I'd be likelier to go to, it's like taking Cobb is kind of like these people who draft Frank Gore in season long. Like have some imagination, go for some upside is the way I would look at that.
I want to get your take on Marquise Goodwin because I'm always interested in players who are coming off of really tough matchups and had somewhat predictable duds. So Marquise Goodwin last week had a predictable dud against the Jaguars. Now he gets a really good matchup coming up this week, and we've seen the chemistry that he has with Jimmy Garoppolo. Like in those games outside of the Jaguars games, Garoppolo was absolutely locked on to Marquise Goodwin. His price has come up to 6,600, which is a season high for him. It is more than I want to spend for Marquise Goodwin, but I think you can give him a legit target projection in the 7, 8, 9 range, kind of as a floor. So he stood out to me in the 6K range more than someone like Brandon Cooks, I think.
Yeah, I wanted to pull us back up to Goodwin and Fitz before we moved on. I think that Goodwin's a really good play. All the reasons you said, the targets will be there. The matchup's good against a Rams team that we don't know who all they're going to rest. I mean, look, only 46 guys can be active, so some starters are going to be playing. But this is a team that's just preparing for the first round of the playoffs, whereas the 49ers are trying to close out with a 5-game win streak. I think that we'll see Goodwin get a lot of targets again. I think it's a good spot for him. And I think that Fitz, I'm a little bummed that I didn't get on him last week just because, I try not to get too narrative driven. But you talk about could have been his last game in Arizona. I wrote that up in my game-by-game breakdown and just seemed like a spot where they would really try to get him involved. Again, could be his last career game against a Seattle team that's not that strong in the slot. I think that in tournaments it does make sense to expect 12 to 15 targets for Larry Fitzgerald, and it's not a bad idea to roster him in that format.
Jarvis Landry certainly has a good matchup against the Buffalo defense, which kind of pushes their targets inside. Concern with the David Fales report, though, has me a little bit shaky on Jarvis Landry. Does that make you be off Jarvis Landry?
Not necessarily off, but it doesn't make him as locked in. I mean, we've really played him for that enormous floor he has, and then the big red zone role gives him enough ceiling. I think I'll bump his floor down a little bit this week, so I'll probably stay off him.
One other guy that I think always bears mentioning is AJ Green when he's in this low 6K range. Matchup obviously isn't great, but I think if you look at the splits with Jimmy Smith and without Jimmy Smith, Baltimore has been very beatable. Also, AJ Green has gone into Baltimore before, even with Jimmy Smith, and had some really big games. I don't particularly think that the Bengals are going to play well in this spot, but I mean, just on like a bet on talent type deal, do you have any interest in AJ Green?
I don't have any interest. I've seen a lot of people who like him, and I'm fine with that. I'm not going to try to talk anybody off of one of the 3 or 4 best wide receivers in the NFL in any matchup. I mean, if you're saying, look, I think AJ Green is going to get 10 targets against the Jags and I want to play him, go for it. Like, this dude is so good that if his price is down, I'm totally fine with that. He's not a guy I'm going to be going for, but just because I try to avoid guys who could crater your roster. And I think a game against Baltimore just brings too much risk. And I think I can get that same upside somewhere else. But yeah, I would be totally fine with somebody else playing him if that's your style of play.
Any other plays you want to mention at the wide receiver position?
No, I think we hit on like literally everything.
Well, we didn't mention Roger Lewis, who
oh God,
I don't want to play him, but
we started late, and we're like, who cares what time we end? We're gonna just cover every player.
All right, let's move to the tight end position, where I don't like a lot this week at tight end. I hope you do. Man, it's like every week it's just like so annoying finding a tight end. I should have just played Gates last week. Was just way too stubborn.
So you didn't play Gates?
No, I played Delaney like a total moron.
I did 3 main teams, and I had Ebron, who you sharded on during the show. And
I had no interest in Ebron. Yep.
Ebron, and I played Delaney, and I played Gronk. So
yeah.
But no, yeah. I mean, look, dude, this team is. Wouldn't you say Hunter Henry is a top 3 pass catching tight end? Like
yes.
Gronk, Kelsey, Henry. This team hadn't given him more than 5 targets in 2 months. Why are we expecting Antonio Gates to get 8 targets? Whatever, it happened. Look, I like Gates this week because, again, last game of career. What do you think? And do you realize the Raiders have now given up more yards and more catches to the tight end than any team? More than the Browns, more than the Giants. I mean, what is Phillip Rivers going to do? He's in love with Antonio Gates. He's going to like, these guys are like bunk buddies or something. He's his house guest or whatever. I don't know what this is.
From a usage perspective, like Gates's role is ridiculous. He plays way more than Eric Ebron. Gates ran a route on 90% of Phillip Rivers dropbacks last week. Like, he's smashing guys in snaps played, routes run, targets. So yeah, I've seen a lot of people poo-poo Gates, be like, well, I'm not going to chase it. And it would be really sick for me to chase it after, like, I wasn't on it whatsoever last week and I was so tilted about it. It would be really sick for me to chase it, but he's 4,200 now. He's in that Ebron range. He's in that Charles Clay range. He's in that Jack Doyle range. I think maybe my favorite play in this 4K range is Jack Doyle. He's the only one I can be like, hey, listen, dude's going to get 8 to 10 targets. He has a reasonable matchup. It's like, I don't love it, but at tight end, that's kind of like the name of the game. I don't love it, but maybe he's okay. So tell me not to chase Antonio Gates and Doyle's okay.
I can't do that. I hate it too. I'm so glad to hear you say that you weren't on Gates last week. Cause I'm sitting there like, I mean, and again, Ebron was my favorite cheap guy. I paid 1,200 more, got like the same score, but I'm sitting there like, dude, like, how did I miss everybody 50% owned in double ups? The dude puts up 20 points at 2,500 and it's a team that like Hunter Henry is a phenomenal player and they're not throwing him the ball. And that was so tilting last week. No, I really do think that we see 7, 8, 9 targets again. Like, this isn't – so, all right, Adam, I hate to bring up bad memories, but Kobe in his last game, this isn't quite that, right? Because this isn't basketball. One player can't just hog the ball. The Chargers still have a shot at the playoffs. Mm-hmm. But, is it going to surprise you if Gates gets 10 targets? It's not going to surprise me. Like, it's just absurd. But no, I'm with you. I think the Doyle's a phenomenal play as well. I think the Doyle's going to get 7, 8, or not phenomenal, phenomenal for the tight end position for what we have to work with. This is the best we have at the low end. It's Gates, it's Clay, it's Doyle. And on Clay, I'll point out, you brought up Kelvin Benjamin. The Dolphins are top 3 in the NFL in preventing catches to wide receivers. And they don't have a lot of talent on the outside, but their entire scheme pushes the ball away from wide receivers toward tight ends. And so I think that we're just going to see a lot of targets for Clay. It was 7, 8, 9 targets for Clay, 7, 8, 9 for Doyle, 7, 8, 9 for Gates. So I'm fine with any of those guys. I would love to make it up to Gronk. We talked about, Brady being in a good spot, but Brandon Cooks having, I think, 7 red zone targets all year. I mean, they don't throw to Cooks in the red zone. He only gets 6, 7, 8 targets a game. No Burkhead. You've got Kenny Britt and Philip Dorsett on the field. So I think that Gronk is the place to go. Obviously, you've got to make it up to him. If you're paying down, for me, it's these guys. And one other name I'll throw in there is Rhett Ellison, who, if I'm going to a Giants pass catcher, Rhett Ellison is a blocking tight end, but 7 targets last week. He caught 4 for 60 yards. I do think that he will see in that range again at, I believe, 2,700. So if you're looking at this, okay, who's going to get 7, 8, 9 targets? I think you throw Ellison in there as well.
Glossed over Eric Ebron matchup isn't great against the Packers, but Ebron's role has certainly been somewhat steady over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Any interest in going back to Ebron at 4,500?
Yeah, it's the matchup is what's pulling me off him. Adam, you got to adjust your hat because you're like pulling up your eyebrow like this, and it makes it look like you're not believing anything I say. So you're psyching me out. The Ebron, yeah, sorry. You got me all flustered now with your, like, it's like a detective thing. You're just raising your eyebrow at me. Ebron is not on my list of these like 5 tight ends that I'm kind of looking at. It's the 5 that we've mentioned. But Ebron would probably be the sixth guy on the list, or maybe he and Vernon Davis. It felt nasty to go to Ebron last week with thousands of dollars behind the play. I was willing to do it because of the matchup and his role. Like you said, the Packers are better against tight ends than most people give them credit for. So I am fine not being on that. And then I'll let you talk me on to Greg Olsen, and I'll add him to my list as well.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I think Devin Funchess is overmatched as a top target. I think behind Devin Funchess, they have guys like Russell Shepard and Keelan Clay, and I don't even know who they have behind. So I think
Brent Burson or whatever.
Brent Burson, yeah.
He cut his hair and now he's not good anymore.
Yeah, so I think that the way that the Falcons play defense is kind of push it inside, and I understand that maybe the numbers don't bear that out as well, but I think when you have a featured tight end like Greg Olsen is certainly capable of being, him and McCaffrey should be the featured players for Cam. And the problem with Olsen is he's only like 1,400 cheaper than Gronk, right? So like I would love to find that 1,400 to get to Gronk, but also we'll also have a fraction of the ownership that Gronk will have.
Yeah, I mean, one way to find that 1,400 is we're about to get to defense, but play the 49ers at 2,100 against Sean Mannion. And I know Mannion's good, hashtag preseason, 6.4 yards per pass attempt, which is like would be the worst in the NFL, whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think that we could find the salary to get to Gronk. I have Olsen down for 6 to 7 targets. Cam has been throwing about 25 to 28 times a game. I think we see 6 to 7 go to Funches, 6 to 7 go to Olsen, 6 to 7 go to McCaffrey, and then the rest kind of get spread out. But yeah, I mean, I'm fine with Olsen, but just his price is a little aggressive for what I want to pay.
Totally agree. All right, let's get to defense. You mentioned the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously, pricing came out before the Rams announced that they would be playing Sean Mannion and Malcolm Brown and Josh Reynolds. They're 2,100. They've been playing way better ball lately. Reuben Foster is a baller. It's hard not to take that savings at 2,100, specifically in cash games for sure. I think there's huge merit to paying up in tournaments, but for cash, I think the 49ers make a lot of sense.
Yeah, agreed. Are you think they're going to get ownership traction this week, or you think that's going to be a team that people just kind of look at Rams and all right? Yeah, I mean, I'm totally good with that. I think those savings are just fantastic. Like you said, it's a much better defense than people are giving them credit for. This is going to be a good team, man. Especially you talk about Pierre Garçon gets healthy next year. They're going to bring in some good free agents with Shanahan and Garoppolo. People are going to want to go there. I mean, this team has a good foundation. I'm excited about it. I think that we'll see their defense play well this week. I think we'll see them close out with another win. So 49ers are definitely my favorite defense. And then we have these kind of weird situations where, like, all right, the Steelers against the Browns would be fantastic, but who's going to be playing on the Steelers? The Ravens against the Bengals. Bengals are kind of laid down, but, Ravens without Jimmy Smith, it's just like a little less to be excited about. There's more opportunities for the scoring to be there for the Bengals. So, I haven't fallen in love with anything to pay up for. What about you?
Yeah, no, I think the Ravens are maybe better than you give it credit for. No left tackle for Bengals. Obviously, their offensive line is a total disaster going on the road. It's going to be absolutely freezing in Baltimore on Sunday. So I think that could lead to maybe some more errors than usual from Andy Dalton, those guys. I think the Vikings, I know that the Bears want to run the ball all the time, but Mitch Trubisky against this highly motivated Vikings defense, I think is interesting. I think the Chargers, whenever they get a good matchup at home, they seem to perform really well. Best pass rush, awesome corners is always going to be a good recipe for defense against Derek Carr. And I think even though New England, does not rush the passer at an elite level, anytime you have Bryce Petty back there, and they're even talking about giving Christian Hackenberg snaps, I think they're in play. Seattle.
Christian Hackenberg.
Oh,
Penn State.
Yeah. Seattle against Drew Stanton. The Redskins against Eli Manning. If you think Mahomes isn't the real deal, you could say Denver, who's playing their starting defense against a bunch of backups for the Chiefs. So I think there's a lot of options to go through at defense as you move up. And if you can find one that hits in tournaments, you'll be way ahead.
Yeah, I like the Patriots a lot. As always, defense is kind of the last thing I get to. And, obviously no internet in Arkansas and Oklahoma. So I've had to get Morse code, sent to me from Silva in Chicago, letting me know who's playing who. So I'm a little bit behind on defense at this point. But no, yeah, I like some of these more expensive defenses. Nothing that's making me just like gravitate toward them above the savings. When you think about what you can do with those savings, the difference between a Greg Olsen and a Rob Gronkowski, I think, can make a huge difference. So I think that if we're just talking about the best play, it's got to be the 49ers. But I think that all those teams you mentioned, And I do think that Patrick Mahomes is the real deal. I just think that with the limited weaponry, that's not a place I want to go on offense. I like the Chiefs as well. We're going to see Paxton Lynch under center for the Broncos. I think that's a good one to look to as well. So we do have a lot of mistake-prone quarterbacks. It should be a week, realistically, where we see a fairly high-scoring defense from a lot of different teams, just because of how many backups are out there, how many poor quarterbacks are out there. You mentioned the weather, which you don't know how much cold is going to affect an individual player, but you do know that there will be spots where it affects guys, especially these idiots who refuse to wear sleeves for their games in 10-degree weather. So, definitely a lot to like at defense, which makes it tough because there's not like a standout team in this higher end. But I think we can definitely get a high score from defense this week.
All right. For the last time this season, we are going to move to the stacks. Everybody fast forwarded to this portion of the show. They want to know what stacks to play and print the money. We're going to give one contrarian stack and one conventional stack. JM, why don't you start with one of those?
I'm going to go with my boys, Matthew Stafford and Marvin Jones. And at this point, I'll throw Kenny Golladay in there too and just load up. Jamal Williams, bring it back on the other side with Jamal Williams, who is, if they fall behind, he's going to catch passes. He's going to be on the field basically every snap. I mean, Mays is going to get, just work spelling Williams. That's it. So whether the Packers are behind or ahead, they should be behind. They should be passing. A lot of work to go around in that game indoors when you have all this cold weather in other spots. So that's where I'll go. I don't know if that's contrarian or chalky, but I'll call that fairly conventional.
I think that Stafford is going to end up being one of the more popular quarterbacks, but I don't think Marvin Jones is going to jump off the page at people. So, I think that'll be a little bit of mix of both. For my conventional, I will go with Kirk Cousins paired with Jamison Crowder and Josh Doxson. You could substitute Crowder for Vernon Davis. It's like such a leap of faith with Vernon Davis, who we didn't actually touch on, but hasn't caught more than 2 balls in a game in literally 7 weeks. Obviously, the matchup is amazing. He's still playing a ton. So I don't hate going to Vernon Davis, but certainly either Doxson and Crowder or Doxson and Vernon Davis. I already talked about how well Kirk Cousins has been playing. This Giants team is just a total absolute train wreck, and I think the Redskins go in there and play well against this dead Giants team.
I'm going to go with my boy Jimmy Garoppolo, who should be the starting quarterback of the Patriots for the future. They should have kicked Tom Brady to the curb after this season. I fully believe that. Instead, Garoppolo will go make it rain in San Francisco for the next 15 years. I will go Garoppolo to Marquise Goodwin as my contrarian stack. I like that one a lot. I think that can put up a big score this week.
Yeah, that's a really good one. That's actually a good play. I'm going to give you a.
That's what I try to do. That's what I'm here for. Now let's get the game theory bros play. What do we have?
Well, this won't even be a game theory bros play. This is just a bad play. But I'll go with Mahomes to Demarcus Robinson for the hashtag team preseason play. Dude, if you watch Mahomes in preseason, you would have been like, this dude is the savior. He was so awesome, and Demarcus Robinson was his go-to guy. Played Demarcus Robinson in, I think it was week 4 of preseason, and it was just he caught a long touchdown. It was just total pants-off sex. So week 17 is trying to all about relive those memories of week 4 preseason. So if you want to stay true to the brand, that's the stack.
There you go. That's it. That was good transition there.
It's a great way. It's a great way to end the season.
Sharpest show out there. This is how we close things out.
I really appreciate everybody listening, everybody who gave us feedback on Twitter all year, everybody who laughed at the hippie jokes. If you have more hippie jokes, feel free to send them. I find them very funny.
Submit them via snail mail.
Yeah.
And JM will get it eventually.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. That's going to do it for this week 17 show. Serious thanks to JM for doing this show every week with me. Thanks to all you guys for watching. We will be back hopefully next season, 2018. For JM, for Jerry, I am Adam. Good luck on the last regular season slate of the season.